Give us a preview, Laurence, of what storylines you're following. What are you most interested to see and cover over this weekend?
Well, it's very much two stories here. There's the sporting side, which I'm sure we'll get into, but it's also 1 year on since there was a missile attack 10 kilometers away from the track on the Friday practice. And, that very nearly came to a point where the drivers boycotted the race over safety concerns. In the end, they were talked round to taking part in the race, and it went ahead safely. F1 and Saudi Arabia and the FIA have bumped up security measures again this year. We're not allowed to talk about exactly what's been done, but they have made efforts to make sure that that everything is a little bit safer and there's more precautions in place. And without going into global politics, it looks less likely that the conflict that resulted in the missile attack last year there seems to be progress with a ceasefire that was in place until last October, but it elapsed, but it's kind of been extended in that there's been relatively few issues since then. So that side of it is still a talking point, as are human rights in Saudi Arabia. That's a very important thing. I think that F1 needs to talk about it, and F1 has said that it will do so. It's going to countries with the intention to bring about a better, shine a spotlight on issues in the countries it goes to. So there's still a responsibility there for F1. And then, of course, there is a Grand Prix to be held. And I think as a second race of the year, and given how dominant Red Bull were in Bahrain, there's a lot of questions that are hanging in the air as to who's quick, who's not. Is the Aston Martin pace real? Is it not? And at the moment, we're still kind of speculating on this very specific track, based on data that we have from this very specific track in Bahrain. And now we're going to somewhere quite different in Saudi Arabia. So we could get a different picture again. I think most of us are hoping that it's going to be a more competitive one, but we'll just kind of have to wait and see.
Well, to one of the things you brought up, I'll turn it to Nate because I feel like he'll like to answer this. Will we see consistency from Aston Martin? Could we see another podium?
I think that's going to me, that's the fascinating thing going into the season. I know we've talked about Ferrari, Mercedes and Red Bull, but Aston Martin are that kind of joker in the pack now. And I think that what was great about Bahrain was they looked like they had a quick package, and then obviously, qualifying, we're like, okay, is it as quick as it looked? And then in the race, I think with Alonso there behind the wheel, it was really competitive. And obviously they capitalized on Ferrari having their issues. So I think with Alonso, they'll be competitive. It's clearly a very, very quick car. I don't think they'll just take some massive step back. And I think Ferrari and Mercedes are struggling enough that, there's room, there's places for them to steal there. So I'd definitely back Alonso to be up there. Maybe podium. I mean, who knows? Like Laurence said, if Lewis had been able to fight a bit better, if Charles Leclerc had finished, he would have finished fourth or fifth. But as people know, I'm fully on board the Fernando Alonso hype train. So, and to be fair, Lance Stroll did very, very well. I actually think that's a really interesting storyline this weekend, is with his injuries, how he's going to deal with Saudi. He raced in Bahrain. It was super impressive. He did. But if you look at the Saudi circuit, that is going to be so taxing on his wrists. So, massive respect that he got in the car and raced last week. But I wonder if he'll struggle a bit more this weekend. He's obviously had 2 weeks to kind of recover, but it's still pretty taxing. So that might hurt Aston Martin in the long run. But yeah, I'd definitely put them in there. That's my very long-winded way of saying yes to your question,
Yes.
Casey. So
all right, well, let's get to it. As the host of this podcast, I am protected from ridicule. You are not. Nate currently leads the standings in predictions, one race through, 1-0. Good for you. Need I remind you that Charles Leclerc, who you both had finishing on the podium in Bahrain, will be taking a 10-place grid penalty. Who are you picking to finish on the podium in Jeddah?
Do I get to go
And
first?
actually,
this time?
did you go first last time?
No, I went first. So Laurence can have the home pick, and I'll take the visitor pick.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to go really, really boring because last time I went wild and it didn't work out. So I'm going to say Verstappen, Perez, Sainz.
That is very boring.
That is boring.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to go less boring.
Writing.
Sorry, Casey. I'll let you. Right.
Nate,
I'm going to go
ready.
boring and then less boring. So I'm going to go Verstappen because we've got to cover our backs with these bets, haven't we? I'm going to say Verstappen, Sainz, Alonso. I'm keeping the Alonso hype alive. I think I'd like to think that something we'll see something that suggests Red Bull aren't completely bulletproof. A reliability issue, something like that. Because I think without it, if the two Red Bulls finish first and second again, you just start to think, are these two just going to finish 1-2 all year? And I mean, it would be great if it's Verstappen that has that issue, because it looks like he's going to dominate the season. But that's my pick. And yeah, I think Alonso is going to be featuring a lot in mine this year. Just in case you guys hadn't worked that out, I'm just going to stick him third as long as I can until he wins a race.
We had worked that out. You don't have Sainz. No, you do. No, I'm sorry. You have Perez in 2.
Yeah,
No,
I have Perez in 2, but we might be being a bit harsh on Perez, because this is a track where, had there not been an early safety car last year, he would have had a really good chance of winning. He was very competitive here. Admittedly, it was at a point when Max was struggling with the car relative to Checo, and that doesn't seem to be the case this year. But yeah, I'm going to keep him second for that reason. I think Checo could spring a surprise, certainly be closer to Max here than he was in Bahrain. And
I said Sainz second.
That's right.
You did say Sainz, so you don't have Perez finishing on the podium. Okay.
No, I think something will happen to one of the Red Bulls. But Laurence is right. I think if you look back at the races that Checo has won, he's very, very strong on street circuits, especially. So, so me not putting him on there is actually a bit of a slap in the face. So sorry to Checo and Checo fans if they're listening.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.